Welcome to the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, aka Blender Ed, Blender HD. If you want to follow me on Twitter, the co-author of the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports, 15-hour audio DFS Masterclass, as well as the Advanced Player's Guide with the custom Excel tools at theoryofdfs.com. And this episode, I'm joined by the destroyer of DFS ecosystems, the person that single-handedly gave out the goose on episode 45 of this very podcast, the Black Box, August 17th, 2021. It's Daniel Hutchings, aka nerdytenor. I said on Twitter that this was going to be your trial, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be a good judge.
Well, I did some research with my lawyer before the show and was relieved to discover that there's no death penalty on the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. So that was a huge relief. So I don't have to worry about that. But yeah, I don't know. You might be a little biased, but it is pretty funny. I think I've talked to people about this topic many times, and it's just I don't really have that much power, and everybody's like, why, why would you give away your secrets? Aren't you hurting your EV? And it's just so touching that they care so much about my
Your
EV.
right.
I didn't know so many people cared. It was really something. But
to
no,
recap,
I think.
For people that may not have, we're on episode 108 now. That may not have tuned into episode 45. I'm obviously people that listen to this podcast tend to be in the know a little bit more. You made your first ever, I believe that was the first time you've ever been on a show of any type, or
that's right,
kind of expressed any of your opinions. And you're a regular viewer of my Roto Grinder shows, and you hang out in the chat and whatever. You always help out and everything. Good teacher. You're in the Discord as well. That you came on to describe your process, and your attitude is that your background is in poker and solvers and programming and everything, and you built yourself a system to take publicly available projections and ownership and everything, and build a process in which you could determine, which portfolio of lineups that you're going to play that should be profitable, and you back tested it. I mean, you did it like as a kind of as a simulation of a simulation to see whether or not this would be profitable before putting like your money down, and then you got a backer that backed you, and then once you saw that it was good, you didn't need that anymore, and then you came on the show and like, okay, I want to describe what I do. But your main thing about describing your process is that like you didn't like release your code or anything. You're not like going into any advanced things of this is how you would accomplish the task, because you said that you have to use trial and error like so many times that you're not going to give that away. You let other people go through the same crap that you had to go through to figure it out. But conceptually, you didn't feel any need to this is what I believe that you could do. And that in and of itself, like some people like Brian on Lulz would say, it's like, well, maybe you'll give someone an idea and it'll create a monster at the higher stakes or higher volume. I think that's where the main consideration is. I don't think this whole thing of like you're destroying the entire DFS ecosystem and the sim wars of 2023 have ensued. I mean, I said it on Davis's podcast, on the Takecast, like, will it make some of the more average players a little bit better? Yes. Will it make some of the above average players a little bit more elite? Yes. But I still think, do you agree, because coming from a poker background, that no matter how many people are using solvers and advanced strategies and study up on the game, like the profit really comes from the people that don't do that. And as long as there's enough people that don't do that, like everyone can eat.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I have on my to-do list once the MLB season is completely done. We're almost there. I want to chart over time buckets of EV in the large field GPPs over time. So that was this will be my third MLB season. And I have a ton of data. I did, like just this year, I did 307 slates and 2,028 contests in MLB this season. So I have that almost times 3. And I'm curious to chart over time, just using my biased Postlock Sims. What percentage of the field was plus EV? What percentage of the field was losing but less than the rake? And then what percentage was losing a little bit more than that? And then what percentage was losing a ton? And I'll be curious to see over time, but it's really that last bucket that dominates the equation, because if you do the math on what EV is available to win, it's dominated by either really bad lineups or just massively similar lineups in large field, right? So that's going to be the question. But when it comes to like me talking about stuff, and I just think I was going to talk about why I think that's not such a big concern, but the main point is like anybody can release any information at any time on this stuff, and there's nothing anyone can really do about it. Like Osimo could go open source tomorrow if they wanted to. I don't think they will, but there's no like secret society for the preservation of daily fantasy secrets.
There isn't.
And,
there isn't a secret
if
chat.
there is one, I didn't get an invite. If there is one, I don't know. Nobody.
Everyone plays
me,
the same lineup in double ups, and I thought we were all sharing the secret chat.
That's right. Yeah, so I do think it is. I agree. I think it's dominated by the bottom end, and I think, I'm proud of what I created for myself, but I don't think it moved the needle very much. I think everything I've done is not it. All of the precursors to what I've done was in the air, and there are already other people probably doing everything I've done, and probably a few people better at it than I am. And
because that's the point. Because I've talked to other people, and it's like what you're doing is not anything. What the sim, or not, maybe not what you're specifically doing, but what these sim products, right? You run our simulations here and of contest sims, which is something that I said was, quote unquote, the Holy Grail when I talked to Justin Freeman, saying, something like that is what you should be doing conceptually. And there's nothing publicly available that even comes close to doing something like that. That I view it the same way as like optimizers were, 6 years ago, and projections were 4 or 5 years before that. It's like, oh, like someone came out with actual projections for NFL that people can subscribe to. I've been doing NBA projections myself and plotting out and doing like, well, now people have this thing that they could just look at, and yes, the field does get better, but like these are things that people are already doing. Yeah. Do you feel, Daniel, that I don't want to use like for a soundbite or anything like that? Do you think that the people that are complaining, and I don't know how much of the complaining is real complaining or troll complaining.
Most of it's troll complaining, but right, there's a few people who are serious about it for sure. I've talked to a couple. Yeah,
is a lot of it based on the fact of like, oh, I'm doing exactly what you're doing, exactly conceptually what you're doing for several years, right. And I don't want to give any other people the ideas to do it, because I think that's to get back to Brian's main concern is that he's not concerned about the stochastic sim subscribers that like, let me throw in one line. The solver has a one lineup thing, and we could debate. And I want to talk a little bit about the methodology of some of these tools.
Yeah,
but
sure.
But the amount of people that it'll greatly affect you in these large field GPPs, especially, is just so minimal from a price point perspective, right? Because it's expensive. I think the main concern is that we don't like someone that recently like over the past like maybe 2 years, like what's his name, BGR Seth or whatever.
Oh,
Right, like we have some people come out of, you came out of kind of nowhere. It's like, oh, who's this guy doing well? They're more concerned about like that. They're concerned having a new whistles go woo, a new a new 150 maxer that is as good or better than them. That's taking up that's sucking away some of that EV.
Yep.
But to the average person, like, that ecosystem's always going to change. In high stakes poker, like, yeah, the high stakes game has, like, there's 9 people playing. There's like three, 2 whales and 3 like sort of okay players, and then really high stakes, and then like someone leaves. Like one of the better players leaves for even better opportunity, and there's another spot there. Like we've seen as many people leave the DFS ecosystem that were there.
Yeah.
Why doesn't that continue? Why is this not like a zero-sum thing where 2 years from now, let alone 10 years from now, that it ends up being that like, oh no, it's just Sims against Sims?
Yeah, it could be, and I think it's definitely true. Like I would say to that, anytime you help someone in a zero-sum, well, actually negative-sum game like DFS or poker, you're necessarily hurting someone else, right? That's just the nature of it. It's unavoidable.
So why are you hurting everyone, Daniel?
I'm helping somebody and hurting somebody else. I mean, I enjoy talking about this stuff. I like going on shows. I like having private conversations. I like going on Discords. That has value to me, and I get things out of that too. Even talking to people who are much lower down on the ecosystem, either on volume or like I learn a ton from those interactions. So it has value to me just for that. But also it's just, we can do what we want, and so there it is. Right. Like I have my point where I won't talk anymore, and it's further along than most other people's, and that's fine. Yeah, like there's some people who
no one else gets control that. But
and I'm not trying to like having a personal like power moment or anything. It's just everybody has that point at a different spot, and that's fine. I've met people at live finals who never want to make any public anything ever, and that's perfectly fine too. It's just up to people what they want to do. I think the most charitable thing I can say about it, like giving people the benefit of the doubt who claim to be concerned about my EV, is, maybe it's much worse than I think, and maybe it's costing me a lot more in EV than I actually realize. And if I knew how much it really cost, I wouldn't have said as much. Maybe. I kind of doubt it. I think anybody who's good enough to be highly competitive in this space doesn't really need my help and would have gotten there without me.
Alex Baker said on the recent Lowell's podcast that listening to the episode with you gave him the idea for what the Stochastic Sims product is. And yeah, I would assume your contention is that Alex is smart enough that he would have came to that regardless.
Yeah, I think at best, maybe I nudged a few people a little sooner. That's it. I think you look at the history of any sort of technology or science, like multiple people end up inventing and discovering the same things like around the same time. Like that happens over and over again because just the ideas that come before are in the air, and there are a ton of smart people in this space. Quite a few are smarter than I am, and they're going to get there. So I'm sure these Sims, this is quote Sim Wars, would have happened with or without me. Maybe slightly later if I'm feeling especially egotistical, but I think it just would have happened.
So. Do you think it is an actual Sim war? Have you taken a look at some of these Sim products and the methodologies that go into it? I'm assuming that your process is way more advanced or intricate than these. And do you think that the methodologies that are being used, are they as beneficial as the claims are in relation to the types of people that would be attracted to using them?
Well, it's that last part that's the real question mark for me. So if you are, so I haven't gone deep into any of these products, but I have watched some videos showing them being used, and there's a couple of questions here. The first is who's using them. So if you're somebody who's like in sort of the bad bucket, like you're losing twice the rake or more in EV, so you enter the big GPP, which has 15% rake, and you're losing 30% on average. Okay. If you won't use one of these tools, even not being very sophisticated in how you use them, my intuition is that would be an enormous benefit. Like you might get much closer to the break-even line, and probably past the losing less than the rake line, just by doing something basic with these tools. That's assuming you know how to use these tools and don't blow yourself up with them. But yeah, I think for people who are already, close to break even or small time winners, I think it's helpful, but it's going to be a much smaller delta and improvement for that kind of player. I think, I can't remember who I was listening to. It might have been the Lost Lulls, but each increment of improvement is harder and harder. Like it's much easier to go from minus 30% to minus 5% than it is to go from, minus 5% to plus 10%. Like that's a much bigger jump. But I think in general, what I've seen seems like a good approach. In terms of comparing it to my own process, like you mentioned that my process is more intricate, and there's some ways that's true. I think I'm more advanced in some ways and less advanced in others. My approach has some advantages and disadvantages, but there are a lot of pieces to make it work. One that can be very important is just the trade-offs between speed and quality, because I'm frequently running things minutes before lock. So because of lineup changes or last minute released lineups, especially for sports like, I don't do a lot of basketball, but that would be an obvious one. So a lot of the challenge to getting this stuff really competitive is to make it quick enough to run last minute and have a high quality output. So there's just a ton of engineering work to make all of that scalable and, relatively low amount of bugs and errors in that process, right? Because, baseball is pretty funny. You've got the Giants haven't released their lineups and lock is in 13 minutes. Well, if I get that lineup with 8 minutes to go, I can use that and do everything from scratch all over again, which I think is a pretty substantial edge for me, especially if the new lineup is so different that it changes the combinations that are possible. That could be a significant edge where if you don't have that ability, you're stuck managing late swaps and trying to do the best you can after the fact, which is harder. So I do see, just to sum up, I'm just rambling a little bit, but I do see a lot of the pieces of these new tools seems like a sound approach. Like, guess what the field is going to do, see what does well against that field using simulations of athlete results, and see which lineups would have beaten the field. That seems like a smart approach.
But I think that approach has two prongs to it. And to get back to what you said earlier about, I agree that if you're a minus 30% player, like using these to get to break even seems like almost a no-brainer. The problem is, the paradox is, the types of people that are 2x, 3x, 4x the rake are people that look at these types of tools going, I don't even understand. They're not even aware, or they're the types of people of like, I'm not going to let a computer make my lines.
That's right. And also, I haven't done a in-depth analysis, but when I've run these Postlock Sims, there is a strong inverse correlation between the number of lineups you enter and your EV. So the absolute worst lineups are usually put in by people entering a single lineup or a couple. So I guess the question, and I know nothing about the business side, is like, are people going to be willing to use such a tool if they're putting in relatively low volume like this? I have no
And
idea.
there's just a lot of those, like the bad
Yeah.
lineups are just a lot of those people. So people may go and they're in this bubble of DFS. They follow DFS people on Twitter. They listen to this podcast and they go, oh, everyone looks at projections. Everyone, and even some of like the smaller sports or anything, but you still, I mean, I'd say that the slant in NFL is no longer like a good contest to play because more than half of the entries are from 150 maxers. But then people go, well, what's the other 50%? Like the other 50% are a mishmash of, like, yeah, there are some people that put in 80. There's some people that put in 40. But people don't realize, like in the Millie Maker, just how many people put in 1 to 5 lineups that make up like the majority of the entire contest, only because there's just so many. When there's only so many 150 maxers. There's only so many multi-enterers that there could be, that it becomes, especially in the Millie Maker, where you get negative EV lineups winning the Millie because it's in poker we called implicit collusion, right? That's the old Skolensky phrase of, yeah, you have aces, but you're up against 8 opponents. Like, you're a dog to win this hand. Like, you're the most probable, but you're still less than 50% chance to win this. Dude, there are tons of onesies and twosies out there that someone randomly will, one of them, tell me the person that puts in one lineup into the Millie that's won 3 Millies with one line, like a one lineup that has a lineup that makes no sense. Like there's the person that's found like the Oracle or something, right? There's the time we found the Time Lord there. But like these tools, they to go into the methodology. Do you believe that I've surmised? Remember, I have a much more conceptual understanding of these things than can I program them myself. That it's much easier, or it's easy. I don't want to use the term easier, but you could be much more accurate in projecting player outcomes and game outcomes and correlations and stuff like that, much more than predicting field lineups.
Yeah. In some ways, it depends on the sport, but in some ways, I think it's a harder problem. I think it really, and other people have pointed this out. I think Brick was talking about this, where if you're using one of these tools for large field and you're simulating a large field of opposing lineups, as long as you're not too dumb about how you do that, as long as you get a large mix of lineups, you'll probably, because there's the number of them is so large, you're probably going to get pretty close, assuming your ownership projections are decent. And as long as you mix up all the combinations. So, if Pirates stacks you're expecting to be 5% of the field, you want to make sure that they're not all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You want to, a nice mixture of those, right? And if you have a 30,000 man contest, you're probably going to be somewhere close enough, as long as you're intelligent about that. But it gets much harder when you're simulating a small contest, like a 20-man contest, where it's not so easy. You may have constructions where that pirate stack in the 20-man, like, you can make a profitable pirate stack, but only if you're the only one who has it. So now you're playing a guessing game. Like, is someone else going to play this or not? And now it's sort of the I don't want to call it crude, but like sort of volume-based approach you can use in a large GPP, where you just you shake on a bunch of lineups, that sort of a big stew, and it sort of looks approximately correct. That kind of breaks down if you're talking about a small contest.
That's reliant on ownership projections, and my attitude is that I think I think ownership the accuracy of ownership projections versus player projections is much wider.
Yeah.
And there's a very big difference only because, I mean, this is what I study CSVs for, is going through and saying, like, oh, this past slate, like, projections would say that Zach Moss should be 18% owned, right? And anything I run says that 18% is actually under owned, is over owned for that. He probably should be more like 13 or 14% owned. And then he comes in at 8% owned. And from my exploitative approach, like the fact that I have less of Moss, I should actually have over on Moss. Like if I created field lineups based on if I had Moss at 18% and Kenny Walker at 10% and I had Jerome Ford at 8% and Tony Pollard at 28%, and if those numbers are off, like the numbers, would this be true? The higher the number is, like based on your argument of like it's a big stew. There's 400,000 lineups or even 50,000 lineups, whatever, big field contest. That if my field that I create, let's say, as 24% Tony Pollard and he ends up coming in at 28%, that isn't as big of a deal as, well, I have 18% Moss lineups, but he only came in at 8%. Like, that's a very big deal. And if I have someone that like 2% that came in at like 7%, like that, those are much bigger deals. That if I have 30% Pollard, if I have Mike Williams at 25% and he comes in at 22%, like probably the EV calculations are not going to be dramatically off. But it's these other cases where, like, once you add a what would be a 66% difference between like 10 and 15, right?
Yeah.
Not just for one player, but for a multitude of players. I don't care about the guy that's 0.2% owned that ends up being 0.3% owned, right? I don't necessarily care about that. I don't care about the guy that's 48% owned that ends up being 50%. Like, those don't matter. But aren't there enough of those discrepancies that, like, once you compound them on top of each other, that the stew becomes like you predicted too many carrots. Like, you have too many, like there's not enough green beans in there. And especially once you add correlation to the mix, like of your own line, you're simulating player performances and everything like that, the margin of error, the error bars on these EV calculations could be, could be like a lineup that's projected to be, 62% ROI could actually be a negative 37% ROI, like just with a couple of those switches. Like your assumption is that these tools work methodologically proper to most degrees if player projections and ownership projections are reasonably enough accurate. But describe the case where the ownership projections are not as accurate of what the field actually does.
Yeah, well, it gets to the question of for me, the question of noise versus bias comes in here, where so you can imagine someone who uses these tools, plugs in their reputable projections and ownership, creates a reasonable field, but the ownership is off, and the so-called highest projected lineup that they come up with is actually negative EV because they were in the wrong direction on ownership. So that's absolutely a scenario to take seriously. I'll be interested to see how people that use these tools and also incorporate diversification, because if it's one thing to say that it could be wrong in one direction, but if the entire process is on average right, then if you spread your bets around enough, you should be plus EV. So maybe you're wrong about the Pirates, but you're right about the Dodgers and the 3 other teams. So,
right, but you're describing a portfolio of, like, you can build a 150 set that you may be off on some, but you're like, it's the same thing with your like kind of like balanced approach of like, you don't care what the ownership is, because you may have this lineup may be over-owned, but I have less of them.
Yeah.
Right. So like, but I'm describing individualized lineup EV that if you're not like, I don't want to rely on, well, if you build a 150 set, you're bound to be plus EV to a certain degree. If that's what the product is for, I mean, like conceptually, you can't just tell someone that like, yeah, you're gonna be right on some, you're gonna be wrong on the other, and not even know which way it's gonna be.
Yeah.
And then just do it. I mean, you can't, to me, you can't use someone that is not building a volume-based approach of like, I'm going to spam everything and get a 2 to 3% ROI.
Yeah.
And even though like, it's the same thing that I say about like triple ups and quintuple ups, like the easiest to exploit in DFS is especially in the weeks where like the cash lineup is like very obvious or a 2v2 from the highest projected lineup. And like people just throw these lineups into these 3Xs, 5Xs, 10Xs. It's like, dude, just play a 6v6, the highest projected 6v6 off of that.
Yeah.
And you've shown in some of your simulations that you can play lineups that are well lower projected just because you're in a triple up with 31 people and like 10 have one lineup and 8 have another lineup and 5 have another lineup, and just simply put that your equity is just too high because of all the duplication.
Yeah.
That it's almost like you're playing a head-to-head and you're getting paid 3x or 5x. Like, how does that not apply to the large field contest where you have people like yourself or 150 Maxers going, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm right in one direction or not, but since I have 150, one will balance out the other. Well, from an exploitative perspective, if you're just building 5 lineups, shouldn't you be much more inclined to go with an exploitative approach? And that's why when you look at these sim tools, like it's much more important that like in that 20-man contest of, if you can figure out you're the only one playing a pirate stack, that's so much more valuable than someone that's like, well, I'm just going to play a bunch of everything.
Right. So I think if you're somebody who likes to play single entry or low entry stuff and you're using these tools, it's going to be really interesting because my concern would be if there are enough people doing similar things and creating similar simulated fields, they're going to have very similar quote unquote high EV lineups coming out of the other end. And now we've defeated the purpose because the field isn't what I simulated. Because you have to consider the end state where like everybody has this or almost everyone has this. Like you start to eat your own tail, where it's the same thing with ownership projections where everybody has the same ownership projections, and so they start to make the counter move, and so the ownership projections are like the opposite of a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like a self-canceling prophecy, right? I mean,
where but Daniel, that's kind of so what I do. Like it's the same thing in NFL or any other sport where I'll go and look at everyone's projections and be like, if everyone thinks that, like we see this we see it in MLB where, well, everyone has this stack is underowned. I think more people are going to go for that stack because they see that I see that it's underowned, and I know how many people are going to see it as underowned. So what I purposely do is go, well, if I saw it, I'm going to bump up I'm going to manually bump up the ownership because it's like I have to compete against who else is looking at the same things that I'm looking at, and it becomes a game of chicken in that point. And then, if everyone was using the same sims, if you understood the output, it would get into that game theory, that third level. You're thinking that I'm going to play that you're going to think that, and you end up playing different lineups. But do you think that just like with optimizers, I mean, it's 2023. You're in a Roto-Grinders Discord, right? You see me answering questions. You see me, there are plenty of people that don't understand the dynamics. I'm not talking about the features of an optimizer, the constraints that you could put in and the way that you'd make the lineups you want to make, but just simply the concept of what a mean or median projection is and what the optimizers is solving a knapsack problem with constraints. Like, it's 2023 and these are people that subscribe to stuff that
Yeah.
still get lineups that are clumped, that are all like they're all messy because they don't know how to use the tools well.
Yeah.
Don't you think the same thing happens with Sims once it gets to the price point in which it becomes much more feasible? It's not hard to $200 a month for someone that's playing, 5 lineups a day and $100 a day is probably not worth it. But
Right.
there is going to be a race to the bottom where, just like with any other tool, this is going to be, a $40, $50 a month type of thing. It'll be tacked on to some package or something like that.
Yeah.
And then people go in and then go, what are the magic settings? Right. They go, and then I'm going to just put in the magic settings and I'm going to press the button and it's going to go, oh, this lineup has the highest EV. And they're not even going to understand that the realization of the EV realization of each lineup is different. Like, I think that's another thing that may steer people away in the beginning is that some of the highest EV lineups are lineups that are you the only one playing the pirate stack?
Right.
And the
That's
pirates still only have like a 3% chance of being the top stack. And when you're the only one that plays it and the pirates are the top stack, you win the whole contest. But you also lose, even if no one else plays the pirates, you lose 97% of the time. And if someone else uses the pirate, now your lineup EV goes insanely down. I'm somewhat concerned that people look at these ROI numbers and, well, this line, I'm waiting, Daniel, for the RG shows that I do, where people ask me about, projection versus ownership from a blunt perspective. How much projection should I give up for this? How much ownership should I give up for that? And I'm like, there's really no correct answer there. There's conceptually, you should, if you're getting less projection, you should be getting less ownership. But it's going to be the thing of, do I play the simulated lineup that has a 42% chance of a 42% ROI with a top 0.1% rate of 0.8, or one with the cash rate of this, or do I play the one with the 39% ROI that is a little higher win? Like, I'm waiting for those questions where my answer is going to be there's no correct answer to that either.
Yeah, that's going to be fun for you, I'm sure. Yeah, I think there's a few problems. So to get back to like the beginning and like just what I worry about long term for profitability is you need two things really. You need one of these sim tools to be so easy to run that you basically push a button and it spits out some reasonable mixture of lineups that you can enter, right? That's condition one. And condition two is there need to be enough people using it that there aren't enough bad lineups left to win money. But we're a very long way from that. And I think for people who aren't already playing very high volume, I think it's actually really quite difficult to know if one of these systems is good or not. Like, what would it take for you to actually know if one of these sim tools is good? Like, a lot of data and a lot of trials and a lot of analysis. Like, I'm sort of super obsessed with measuring my own stuff, and I have full control over my own process. And there's still some sports where I'm not 100% sure I'm a winning player. I've been lucky enough to win in every sport, but there's a few I'm not totally clear. So, like, imagine you are a medium player. Maybe you put in a few $1,000s a month, and you try one of these tools, and you're really putting it to the test and trying to create simulated fields, and it's you're not hitting anything. How do you know you've been getting unlucky versus the tool's not good versus you're not using the tool well? I think it's very difficult to tell. And I believe that all of the people I've interacted with from companies that are trying to create these tools are trying to create good tools. I don't think there's any like they're releasing substandard stuff to like weaken the nothing crazy like that, but I don't know how good they are. And I think that's a genuinely hard problem. And if you're a small to medium sized player and you're paying a monthly subscription and you're not getting anywhere, which is still the most likely outcome, right? If you're playing a few $1,000s in GPPs, even if you're really good, you're probably not going to win for a pretty long time, unless it's 10 cent, maybe a 10 cent and 150 max, you might have a shot. But so most of these people, I'm just imagining the experience. They subscribe to one of these things, they make a good faith effort to get the most out of the tool, and they're losing a lot of money. Like, I feel like that's going to be the default experience just because of the way these contests are. So it'll be curious to see how many people stick with it.
I mean, isn't that the default experience with anything?
Of course, yeah.
DFS. I mean,
yeah.
It's one of the main things that I constantly, when I get questions, and dude, there was I think in the Blitz chat, and a good faith person. He's not one of the the stupid people or anything. Asking about oh, I used the. Has anyone hit it big with the Blitz projections at all so far this season? Like, and I said, I want to put things into perspective. It's like, that's like going into the bat chat and on April 4th saying, how did no one's hit it big with the bat, with because I could tell the sense of the question is like, are these projections even good? Because I didn't see a screenshot of someone winning a ton of money. And it's like that sometimes the realization is that or when someone comes to me and says like, oh, I've lost in I play 20 line, I play the 20 max, and I've lost every day for 3 weeks. And I go, congratulations, you may be one of the greatest DFS players in the world. And they don't understand what that means. And I go, yeah, because what is your actual expectation? Like all the equity is first place. So like the types of, like you said, the types of people that this tool could most benefit, I think, are the types of people that don't get those statistical concepts of no, you're like, yeah, even if you're playing 1,000-person field, if everyone was equal, you're gonna win first place one every 1,000 times. I mean, what do you expect in NFL when like, oh, I haven't, it's week 11 and they're like, I've lost in GPP. I played the 3 max, even if it's smaller fields, play 3 max or whatever. So that I've lost money for 11 weeks, or 10 weeks or so. I go, yeah, I've lost in GPP for a week and a half in baseball before. I mean, like once you put into not a time perspective, it's like I've been playing NFL DFS since 2017. I think that was the first time. So I played soccer, then MLB, then stuff. I think main slates, I have less than 90 main slates of right. I mean, that's what, half a season of baseball? That's a half a season of NBA, maybe, or something like that.
I have a few dozen main slates. Yeah.
Right. So how much you say with the data concern of especially NFL.
Yeah, NFL.
Especially because that's the number one, everyone plays NFL. It's like, how the hell do you test? How could you be sure of it? Like Daniel, since DFS has existed on DraftKings, where you could download the CSVs or whatever like that, do you even think there's a reasonable, even enough slates of data for regular size slates that could you even say if you're a good player or not?
I think you just have to put a confidence interval on it. I don't know what that number would be. Not that great with stats. I suspect there are people who've been playing long enough to know whether they're with pretty high confidence that they're plus EV. But I made a similar point in the BAT Discord once where, and I wasn't bragging, I was just, because someone was making a similar complaint about not winning. I'm like, I play more volume in MLB in a day than most of the people play in a month, and some play in a year in baseball, and I have losing days all the time. So if I can have a losing day, that means you can have a losing season. And it doesn't mean, that doesn't mean that you're a bad player. You might be, but you might be a very good player. But I mean, it's funny you bring up NFL. NFL is so hard. I think you have the small sample sizes, and I think it's really quite difficult to simulate well. I've tried so many different methodologies and thrown out almost all of them. And this is one of the areas where I think I'm not especially good, because there are so many, like properly weighting all of the game scripts that could happen, giving them appropriate probabilities, trying to figure out what coaches are going to do. Like there's a lot of subjective data that makes it quite difficult. And so I kind of take the most general agnostic approach that I can. That's roughly correct, but I think it's very hard to do it well. So, like, how do you even measure that your NFL simulations are accurate? Right? Like, it's a legitimately thorny problem. Like, how often should tonight's Monday Night Football end in a game script where this happens and then this happens versus some other game script? Like, that matters a lot, and it's really I think it's quite difficult. So it's quite humbling if you actually take a crack at this stuff, really get in there. It's hard, and I think so. NFL has a dual problem. You've got the small sample size, and you've got a game that's very hard to simulate and test over time. Not just for means and medians and floors and ceilings. Like that's a little easier because, but that's not enough because we care so much about game scripts and outlier outcomes, especially in things like Showdown. Like,
Yeah, can you dive into? I've been told that these types of products, these types of tools, will essentially kill Showdown and MMA, small golf, and I mean, truthfully, I've looked at some MMA stuff.
uh-huh.
It's compared to 2 years ago.
Hmm.
Lineups that were gonna be less duplicated or more duplicated now, like
Mhm.
by a small factor. By
Yep.
lineups that I would have predicted to be 3 are now 5s and 6s.
Uh-huh.
Ones that were predicted to be 1s or 2s, predicted ones to be 8s or 12s, and ones that were predicted to be like 374 are now like 206. Like kind of
Yep.
like it's coming off, and people said like as long if you have obviously these for the main slate for simulations,
Yeah.
like duplication of full lineups is not like the biggest of concerns,
Yeah.
but but the combinatorics, I mean, like Whistles, like if you go to someone like Whistles would say that ownership doesn't of individual players don't matter as much as combinations of players matter, and
Yeah.
that's why you could see lineups that win GPPs that have a fairly chalky high projection, but are being played at a much lower combinatoric rate of like, yeah, you have these
Yeah.
5 players. It's just that most people don't have all 5. They have 2 and they have 3s, but they don't have the 5. Yeah, these 2 people are chalky, but anyone that's playing these 2 are typically playing these 2 wide receivers, and you're not playing
Yep.
you're playing the second lower projected one. Like stuff like that matters. Now, obviously, in MMA and Showdown, I mean, that gets to the extreme example. Well, how do you think? Do you think, based on what you see, are the tools able to better? Are they showing the EV based on any form of duplication in that matter? And secondly, if they get to that, if they are at that point, don't we get into the problem even in large field GPPs that you get that pirate stack problem of like, yeah,
Yeah.
this lineup should be unique, but since everyone could see that it's going to be unique, it's actually going to be duped 4 or 5 times.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think MMA and Showdown are a really good bellwether for where the industry is with simulations and how many people are going to play it, because those games.
I mean, how
Well,
did you simulate that? First off, how did you simulate that the 3 fight? I mean, I mean, truthfully, I mean, take a look at your last MMA win.
Yep.
That, like, you simulate stuff out. It's not like you're like, oh yeah, this 3 fight this 3-round fight is going to be like you need to stack in order to get unique and win first solo. Like it's your programming that just goes through all of that type of stuff.
Yeah.
That like something like that's the type of thing that even people that have more advanced processes almost weed out.
Right.
Like you don't really, other than the main event stack, like it's almost like I don't even consider those lineups.
Right. Yeah, I got lucky there. I think it's interesting. So I am quite the one thing I'm quite fundamentalist about is I never override what my process does. Like I never get in there and edit anything.
Right.
If
you don't
I
have
don't
any
like
hardcore hold it. One of the most frustrating things about like DFS players that get into the game or trying to get better is they want rules.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, like there are heuristics, but there really are no rules. Like, do you have to do that? Oh, don't stack a 3-round fight. It's like,
Yeah.
well, there are outcomes where a 3-round fight ends up being optimal.
Yep.
Is it most likely? No. Could you find lineups that are profitable without doing that? Yes. So heuristically, if you don't have a process of knowing which 3-round fight stacks are worth playing, it's probably better off, because you look at the 2 jars of like plus EV lineups. I always say during the morning show is like, well, here's the jar of plus EV lineups that don't have a 3-round fight stack. And here's the jar that does. This jar has a whole bunch of lineups. So if you want to reach your hand in, this has a whole bunch of bad lineups, and there's a couple in there. Do you really want to reach your hand in and try to figure out which one is the right marble? If you don't have a process, maybe you look at the other jar.
No, I totally agree. And almost everybody plays pretty exploitatively to begin with. I think that's sort of the default style. And given that, if there's some weird thing that a good rule of thumb is serving you well 95% of the time, I can't imagine you're giving up much just making it a rule and doing it 100% of the time, right? Because if you're a good exploitative player, you don't need to reach into the weird jar because there's so many other things you could grab for, right? My rule from my process is I don't have any rules. Like if my process is spitting out stuff that's weird and losing, I need to fix my freaking process. Like I can't.
How do you determine if it's weird? How do you determine?
Well, that's that's going back to the "Are you a genius or are you an idiot?" question. When you come up with something really new that nobody's doing, it's either great or there's a reason nobody's doing it. I think it sort of reminds me of your comment about I was watching one of your shows and you were talking about getting good line value early, and then if the line moves away from you, it's more likely than not that you fucked up. It's not like the urge to pile on more.
Right. But a lot of people
do that. This is not an opportunity to get even more money. Yeah.
Right. So for the prop market,
I feel very. Yeah, I feel very similarly for certainly for Postlock Sims. Like this is where you just simulate the field using your own athlete simulations. Like I have some sports where you would expect me to be near the top because it's using my own stuff, right? So I'm either at the top or very close to the top. But usually, if I have a good process, I'll see other familiar names up there. Some of them are close to me, maybe a little above or below. Those guys are probably doing something roughly similar or using similar projections. And then you've got some other players I know are quite strong who rate plus EV, but maybe a little lower down because they're using a different projection set, but they're obviously quite skilled. Like that's a good sign. If I have a new sport and like my EV for this contest is plus $5,000 and the next one below it is like plus $800, like I fucked up. Right? That's too far. That's too far of a difference, and it means that there's something biased or just flat out wrong in terms of my athlete sims, and it's a sign. So I actually don't want to be at the top in all my Postlock Sims if it's a competitive sport, because that's a sign that I've gone too far off the reservation, as it were. And I have some sports
that's
that
that's kind of the opposite, though, of people that would say that it should be like you should be the highest in your Sims. But I think your goal is to be the highest in your own Postlock Sims within reason of other
within
people that are
reason.
also sharp. And if you're
Correct.
not the highest, like that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It just means that, like, hey, if you're number 3,
Yeah.
2 star players like that, to me, that heuristically makes more sense.
Yeah.
Right. It's
And
very
I
similar
do
to that prop example of like, dude, if you bet the over on something and it moves 4 yards against you, that's not an
yeah.
opportunity for you to go, well, now I got it at a 4-yard discount. Let me dump twice as much money into it. It's much
Yeah.
more likely that your source of truth and your projection initially is somehow off, and maybe it's time to either to try to win your money back by finding something else than doubling down on a mistake that you've already made.
Yeah, that's right. And it is really interesting. I have looked at some sports where there are people who consistently do a little bit better than me in post-contest sims, and I've learned a lot just trying to figure out what they're doing differently, what they're doing better. So it's also, it sort of lights a fire under me to improve my process. So always trying to improve things. But
Are you looking at the ROI numbers post-lock as a portfolio or individualized lineups?
I do both. I find I find a lot of different things for a lot of different sports, but yeah, I do both. And I do learn things that way.
Because
And
from the post-lock stuff that I've seen, the post-contest stuff that I've seen, I think, I don't know who brought it up on Twitter. Maybe it's Nelson Adcock, right?
uh-huh.
He does stuff, and he says, or he or whoever, maybe I'm misattributing it, says that in many 150 max sets,
Yeah.
the EV of the entire portfolio, the ROI of the entire portfolio, is typically concentrated to a small subset of lineups, and the rest are in post contest actually are negative, right?
Uh-huh.
But the problem is, like you mentioned before, of you build the 150 to find the 25 that are heavily plus EV.
Yeah.
And most people would say, well, why don't you just play the heavily 25? The problem is that
Good
there's
luck
no
with that.
way of knowing which of the 25 are, but they're confident that if they build 150, that they do get 25 of those. And it's very similar to even my approach of when, I may not play 150, I may play 75, I may play 50, and I go, I'm fine that 10, 15 of my lineups may end up really not they won't be bad, but they won't be good. Maybe in MMA they'll be duped 22 times, maybe.
Yeah.
But I'm hopefully making up for the fact that my top 10, my top 15 are really good.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that, and I do find that in my own sims where, like, a typical, I'm making up numbers a little bit, but it's in the ballpark. So I'll do a post contest sim of like the big baseball GPP, and basically the bottom, so if my 150 set, the bottom 40 lineups or so are basically break even. So the worst ones are losing money, and then it's like I need to get through like 40 lineups before I start winning money, because the bottom ones are losing, and then a few are winning a little bit of the money back, and by the time to get to lineup 50 or so, now I'm actually winning. And then, like you said, like the top 10 lineups I have are a lot more plus EV than the other plus EV ones. And in fact, one of the things I learned looking at another strong player, I won't say what sport or who it is, but I found that the main reason he was doing better than me in my post contest sims, our top lineups were actually pretty similar. It's just he'd done a better job of not having the worst lineups in his portfolio, and that mostly explained the difference. So our best lineups had similar EV, and he had fewer of the bad ones than I did, which I thought was kind of interesting.
On that regard, that's the opposite approach that sometimes I see when I look at CSVs. There are some quote unquote top players. I'm always using Sharp, and because then the people are like, oh well, he sucks, and this
I
guy,
like
right? But I mean,
competitive. I use competitive, but yeah, I know what you mean.
right, competitive people. Sometimes their portfolios are like heavily weighted towards the not like towards the other side of like they'll play 150 and the EV of their top 25 or whatever is not all great to write home about, but the EV of their bottom 25 is better than break even. Like it's kind of in this zone where as a portfolio that I could see how almost, I don't want to call it a cash game approach, but like I've analyzed some stuff in MMA. There are some users like we know who they are, right? There's some users that they'll play 150 and have like 147 uniques. And then I'll look at some of these lineups and go, I don't even like, it's like all outlier lineups of like these are like on a slate with big favorites, they're leaving 2,500, 3,000 on the table. And I'm like, I'm not sure if the portfolio is how often do these things happen that all they need is one, right? And here's 150 versions, because it's that extreme example of like you take a look at a contest Postlock Sims and you go, these 3 or 4 lineups, 5 lineups, heavily because like they could win solo first and no one else happened to play that lineup, right? And then the next 145 are like losing like twice the rake, right? Like it's like that type of separation as it goes down. But there's also people that play, you see a 150 set, number of uniques, 12, under fives, 36, whatever. And then you run post contest Sims and the ROI actually ends up being positive as a portfolio, even though like half the lineups are like actually small losers.
Yeah.
Right. But like a third of the lineups win like 3x. Right. So it's like you could put this in, and when you win, you're probably duping 68 times with one lineup. You're duping 43 times with another lineup. But you dupe and you win enough of the time, and you have enough of those lineups that you still end up with, you know, a 3 to 5% ROI anyway, even though these portfolios never win like $50 or $100,000 outright, or even win like with a 5-weight chop or anything. But the portfolio is still showing a positive return. It's a lower return than the opposite approach. Just the opposite approach, the variance is absurd. Like you'll just lose for a year straight, like down until you win it big, and you end up winning more money in the process. But these, do you see? I mean, because I'm just looking, I'm doing very rudimentary shit. So it's like to me, like it doesn't. I have no precise way of really just like I'll run some stuff in Excel and go based on all of this. It's like, oh yeah, that's supposed to win X amount of time based on these odds and whatever. And I'm like, oh, this may actually be like this wins enough of the time that a 42-way dupe is not like the end of the world. You'd rather it just be duped 20 times, but like it actually does show a profit there.
Yeah.
Do you think that especially in Showdown and MMA, there seems to be this like tribalism of like the people that like you got to be unique, and the people are like let's celebrate with our 63 friends as long as we win. That like neither of them absolutely is like right or wrong, but there is a right way of both. Like playing all 6 underdogs, you know, with leaving 8,000 on the table in all your lineups, probably wrong. And also playing the top 150 duplicated lineups, probably wrong also.
Yeah, there's plenty of ways to screw up, but there's also different ways to win, right? I think an extreme example of where duping, being highly duped is profitable. I think it was last NFL season, and I played a single game NFL contest. I can't remember if it was actually the Super Bowl or close to it. and I think it had like 1 million entries, and I tied first with like several hundred people, and it was $10,000 payout. And there's an example where the heuristic I think is wrong, because I actually, you can quibble with my sim, but you can imagine how it could be the case that, and I found that however many hundreds of people duped, it was actually underowned. It should have been duped at like double the rate that it was duped at. Even so, even though it was massively duped, it was such a gigantic field that it was still profitable to play that lineup on average. So I think simple rules of thumb for duping and not duping might not be the most useful. I think it sort of comes down to like, what style of play do you want? Do you want to shoot for solo first? And how much variance are you willing to eat? I think, and then it gets back to your point of like, okay, well, once you have that choice made, like how many unique-ish lineups do you want versus other stuff? Then it becomes a question about like, how do you do that strategically, and what are the ways coming up with an intelligent portfolio? Because as you point out, there's bad ways to do both of those, for sure.
Do you think these sim tools, publicly available ones, will I don't want to call it solve, but help you with those types of decisions, like those risk reward decisions of a portfolio? Because there's a difference between what is the EV of a lineup and what is an EV of a lineup portfolio. And I think that people that use optimizers incorrectly with exposures tend to mix up the two. They go like they think exploitative means I'm going to be 30% of the field over a 15% guy, regardless of what their individual lineups look like. Because those individual, you can be you're over the field and all those lineups are all bad, right?
Right.
You could be under the field and all those lineups are great, other than the fact that why aren't you playing this other guy in it? Because it would be much better in those lineups to just play the higher projected guy, because you already built a good enough lineup as it is. So they get involved in that type of stuff, and they come up with these portfolios that, like, you could see that, like, well, maybe only 20 of the lineups are even worth playing, and the other 130, like, are weighing you down so much because you're using the tools wrong. Do you think that from a sim perspective of, I want to build a portfolio, like, imagine instead of like, here are lineups, and it's like, no, I want a portfolio. I want to divert. Imagine NFL, right? Or MLB, right? MLB is probably easier because we have stacks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Let's say in MLB, you're like, I want to play 20 lineups, and I want the sim tool based on my projections and ownership. Obviously, you have to put in the inputs or change them or whatever. And it says, okay, I want 20 lineups, and there's some slider or something, some type of way of measuring your risk profile.
Yeah.
And then it also, like, how much to, like, oh, I want to only play five teams, right? Five man. I only want to play 5 stacks, right? And then give me a mix of anything else, as long as I'm only playing. I only want to root for 5 teams today, right? Or I only want Pirates lineups. And it's like, well, then you're probably getting the 2 chalk pitchers in most of those lineups in order for that to be worthwhile. Like, stuff like this, where instead of people having to figure out, like, exposures, that they could simulate and go, hey, it's very similar to what I do here bluntly. I have a whole set. I build a whole ton of lineups, and I narrow that down to like a candidate set of X, 200. I'm like, I want to play 50 of these. And I know that the ones on the bottom are more risky and the ones on the top are chalkier or whatever like that. And I go, well, I'm going to play, if I'm playing 20, I'll play 5 from here, 5 from here, 5 from here. Like bands of risk. So it's like, yeah, I'll get a Desmond Ritter stack, but I'll also get a Kirk Cousins stack. I mean, I'll get a mix of both. I mean, a tool like, I'm assuming that the portfolio dynamics of weighing that EV realization, to not have it that like, oh, these are all 80% ROI lineups and they're all like
Yeah.
long shots to win. It makes it easier on the person, even if they don't understand that, to be like, what percentage of your bankroll are you playing? What do you like? And it
Yeah.
kind of protects, even for the people that don't understand it, may end up protecting themselves from themselves.
Yeah, I think you'd be good in product development. It sounds like a good idea. I certainly think if you're playing volume, so I generally don't have to consider these things as much because my style of play sort of gives me diversity by default. So it kind of takes care of itself. But if you're a highly exploitative player, and I think a lot of really good players are, like, it's certainly not enough to use one of these tools and say, oh, here are the 20 top ROI lineups. Well, they might be top ROI lineups, but they're not anymore if you play all of them because they're too
Right.
correlated with each other. So if you played one of them, or maybe three of them, you're good. By the time you play the 18th, you're vulturing so much equity from yourself with the correlation that it's not a top ROI lineup anymore. So in that case, if I were to use
It's,
such
it's
a
also
tool,
just to interrupt you for a second.
yeah, go
It's
ahead.
also the case that if you're using this tool and you're sitting, let's say you're sitting next to someone else
Yeah,
that's using the same tool, and they're both going, well, these are the top 20 ROI lineups, and you go, well, I know that these are too risky lineups. That if I'm the only one playing them, like these are good, so I'm only going to take like 4 of them.
uh,
Who knows if the person sitting next to you is thinking the same thing and takes the same 4 or takes the like you get the effect of
yeah,
the same thing occurs also with that as well.
yeah. It's like it's two versions of the eating your own tail. You can literally eat your own tail, or your friend sitting
Someone else
next
can
to
eat
you
your
can
tail.
eat your tail also. So yeah, all of those considerations matter. So I think, and the real question I think will be like, how much adoption of these tools do we get when that starts to become a problem? Where too many, like, because it's basically one level above the field is what you're doing. They're like, I have a good guess of what the field is doing, and I'm going to take one step ahead of them to get the ROI lineups. But if enough people are taking that same step, then it's self-defeating. And now you have to start doing other things to get
Isn't that
different from
already
the other people exploiting the field, right?
Yeah, but isn't
There's
that
a
already happening to some degree? Like if you took the names off of usernames and everything like that,
yeah,
and you have other people like yourself that are doing these like someone like Brian, someone like Ricky D, someone like whoever
yeah,
are already doing this type of stuff. Like it's not a publicly facing tool, but aren't you if you're calculating these lineups to be plus CV, you have to assume that all these other 150 maxers, if they were using the same information or
uh-huh.
similar, reasonably same, would come to those same conclusions. Isn't that in some degree already happening? Your guys is it going to be to the point where average Joes and people that put in 20s and 40s like I do, like are there going to be enough more of that? Like what I said about the slant in the NFL. The slant in the NFL was a great contest when it was 65,000 entries and only
Yeah,
23% were 150 maxers. Now that it's 18,000 entries and 57% are 150 maxers, now it's not worth me playing. Like, is you're acting on, is it going to turn from that to that?
yeah.
Less
So I
so on
guess,
like it's not just that, oh, individually, if everyone had their own individual sim tool, everyone would like imagine no one came out with any of these sim products yet. You developed personally and you reached out to 50,000 people and said, I'm going to personally develop your own sim tool. And everyone's
right.
using it privately. Like it's the same thing as it just being available publicly. I mean,
Well,
like
there's two related, but I think slightly different things worth worrying about here. So the first one I think is easier to talk about, which is if there's enough people doing the same things, then that is sort of a disequilibrium and can be exploited. So that's why I was talking about sort of these tools being like one level above what we think the field is going to do. But and I think Travis was on a podcast talking about, he's like, bring on the Sims. It's gonna lead people to do
Brain
the
over
same.
Sims, dude. Brain over
Yeah,
Sims.
it's gonna lead people down the same. I mean, I'm paraphrasing what he's saying, but it's gonna like lead people down the same like strategic cul-de-sacs, and he'll be able to exploit that. And that's true if these tools or the people using them are or remain relatively unsophisticated, then yes. However, it's not in no way is that like a foregone conclusion, because I spent a lot of time trying to avoid specifically this problem, because I think it does exist for at least a subset of high volume players where they galaxy brain themselves into the same places as other players, and they collectively lower their EV by doing that. Whereas I try to avoid that altogether by using different techniques to randomize my play, which is one of the reasons I don't have as many diversity concerns as a lot of players, because I kind of get that for free. So it's not clear to me long term. So the first thing to worry about is getting stuck in a strategic cul-de-sac and actually losing money with these so-called plus EV lineups because too many people are doing the same thing. But the other problem is if enough people are balanced enough as a group, and the ratios of, just to use baseball because it's easy, the ratios of stack ownership roughly match how often they should hit, then it doesn't matter anymore because the game is too efficient. And this is where I think Travis could be wrong. If it goes in that direction, then it doesn't matter what he does. I don't even know if he probably doesn't even play baseball. I don't know why I picked on him. But if the field is close enough to equilibrium, then you can't beat it after the rake. So if these tools lead there, then that means
Everyone's
can't win
fucked.
anymore. Yeah, then you can't win. It's entertainment only, which is to be fair, what it is for 90% of people. But there won't be any profitable players anymore at that point. And I think, I suspect that's inevitable, and I am shitty at predicting the future. I have no idea when that day will come or at which levels and which games. But I think that is sort of the end state for just profitable DFS play, is when there's enough people playing close enough to efficient that the rake is unbeatable. I think that's the end game.
I mean, isn't that very similar to poker?
Yeah, I think so. I think poker, I mean, as you have pointed out, and I think I have no reason to suspect it would be any different for DFS, but if you're playing low stakes DFS or poker, I don't see any reason why those games won't be profitable forever, right? If you're playing 1-2, or you playing $3 contests, I feel like that's always going to be profitable, because there's always just going to be a lot of players who do not care. It's just entertainment, and those contests are large enough and limited so that highly successful players can't play them. I think if you like to play DFS and you want to be profitable, I feel like you're safe at those levels, and I can't see how that would ever go away. I think
you're not going to pay $200 a month to max out the quarter arcade.
Yeah, you could.
Right, you're going to pay for a sim tool and then play $7.50 worth of volume a day. It's probably not the thing. But I'm talking about poker wise. I mean, coming from the background that you built solver software for poker, that one of the things in the poker community or maybe recently, not recently or whatever. So I follow some poker people.
Me too.
Is this whole the GTO debate of of GTO versus exploitative? I know Galfond has, I'm more on Phil's side with this. Is that bubble you mentioned, the strategic cul-de-sac, right?
Yeah.
And it's I listen to some of these, I watch some of these videos, I listen to some podcasts, and I feel as if, as someone that plays 2-5, 5-10, no limit hold'em live,
Mm-hmm.
I I look at some of the situations that there are discussed. They'll do hand strategy, you know, walking through a hand and they'll go with Pio Solver or whatever. I use Poker Cruncher for my equity calculations. So like I'll have Poker Cruncher, like I'll take a break, go to the bathroom, get something to eat, and like on a recent hand, I'll be like, punch this into Poker Cruncher, but like I'm the range that it gives me for my opponent is not commensurate with the game that I'm playing. And I'm going, well, this is the amount of times that my opponent should have X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, he doesn't have aces. He doesn't have kings. He doesn't have ace king suited. He does like, and it's like, well, why are you taking that? Like, that would be his balanced range. Of like this dude will never flat call with aces pre-flop. Like, this guy will never do that. So I could just take that. Like, there's stuff that people never do, like, or almost never do. I don't have to, dude. I'm playing it even at 510. It's 510 live. It's rare for me to find a check raise bluff on the river. To be like, that's such an under bluff spot that if you have a bluff catcher, just fold. Yeah. Like, you're just going to print just by folding, because on average, unless you really, really know the person and they really know you, like, these are things that just never happen. But on the situations that happen often, most of the time, the solver will tell me to do something that is less profitable in my games. So a lot of times we have these small bets, right? They'll go, oh, it's 510. They want you to raise. The solver says raise to 25. Most of the time I raise to 35. Why? Because most people in live games, if they're going to call 25, they're going to call 35. And you know what? My raising range gets much tighter, because I'm going to get called by much weaker hands. Like, once you put the nodes into these solvers, and I put in my own like live play environment, like it suggests like, oh, you got top pair on the flop, bet twice the size of the pot, because you're up against a range with a calling frequency that's going to call way too often with like a draw, either a naked draw or a top pair weak kicker, or even second pair and a flush draw. But if you went to videos on YouTube or anything like that, they would think that you're nuts, of like, oh, this board hits you, you have the range advantage and the nut advantage, and they can't have these certain hands because you block top pair, and you should only be betting like $15 more often. And I'm like, you're not in these games where dude, I'm in games where they're half the table bomb top pair, like they're betting pot size, but they're because they're trying to protect their hand. And I'm just overfolding in a lot of spots where, like, I have ace little suited or something, and you're not calling out of the big blind, and some guy is swinging hard on an ace high flop, and I just muck it.
Yep. The best thing about that situation is they feel happy with the outcome,
right?
Even though they're giving up EV by not betting half pot some of the time, and like it's too exploitable. Yeah, I mean, this is just
another exploit in live poker that isn't showcased in solvers enough, is that I make so much money catching bluffs on the river because people don't understand how many hands I'm leaving them to bluff at the river. That sometimes I make more money checking the turn than betting the turn. Like, and in some of these games where you bet the flop, they call, and you have a quality top pair type of hand, and then on a dry board where you're not susceptible to, it's a static board, not a dynamic board. I check the turn. I'll check the turn first to act. They'll check behind me, and then I'll check behind on the turn, and they bluff the river because like they called me with like third pair and a gut shot draw, and now they're on the river and they know that they can't win. And then a lot of times people bluff too much.
Yep.
Like they bluff. Right. So like these things are not in solve. solvers that you could like buy, like the preloaded shit, is like this
Yeah.
is how rational people play. But until you like adjust that to your actual environment, like the shit is like completely off, and it gets back to how poker with the equilibrium in poker. Like, yeah, these tools assume a much more equilibrium. Like, how does the tool not assume much more rationality into the field as the field will actually do? Because I look at some
Right.
of these projected fields and I go, this looks way too logical. That
Right.
when I download the CSV, like yeah, maybe individual player ownership. It's like, yeah, this guy did come in at 21% owned, but the lineups that he's in, like half of these lineups are nowhere near the lineups that are being played like that. And it still gets back to I'd love to be wrong, but it's hard for me in my brain without doing it the precise way that you do it. It's hard for me to think that it doesn't get exponentially that the output out of the simulations doesn't get exponentially worse the more and more that no matter how big the stew is, that you're not getting the right pieces of the stew, unless, let me use the caveat like we mentioned before, unless your attitude is, I'm going to play 150 lineups and I'm not sure what ones are good or what ones are bad, but I'm quite positive I'll get 25 to 50 of them good.
Yeah.
Like, if you're not coming from that approach, I can't see how how you could just go by the basis of, I'm going to go and play, like, I'm going to play 5 lineups out of this and just, well, one of them may be good. I mean, like,
Well, I
like
think that there's an easy way around that particular problem. Your last thing first is that you can just pretend you're playing a large set, like, and then you pick a bunch of different looking lineups, and then you pull them out of a hat. On
that's kind of what I
average,
do. That is
yeah,
what
that on
is what I
average,
do.
that's exactly the same as just playing all of them, right? Like picking a random subset. No, not
Yeah, but how do you
considering.
tell how do you tell people this?
Yeah, I mean, this is all just back to the whole exploitive versus balance. I think poker, the analogy with poker and DFS does break down, because I think in low level poker you just have so many more opportunities in the course of a hand to make decisions that are obviously better than whatever the equilibrium strategy would be. Whereas I think the biggest exploits in low limit DFS are quite obvious. It's just
Play the best players.
don't play terrible projected lineups, and don't play the mega chalky lineup constructions. Like, those are the, like, and just to be clear, that the second thing, the mega chalky lineups, they should be played at equilibrium. Like, they are the best, but the exploit is everyone plays them too much, so just don't play those. But I feel like in terms of obvious exploits, I think that's most of it. Whereas poker, it's like every spot you have, like your example of checking back on the turn with a strong top pair on a dry board, like that is almost certainly a play at equilibrium too. It's just against certain opponents, you should do it 100% of the time,
Right.
because you make so much money from them over bluffing the river that you just
And
want
then
to give
certain
them the
opponents, you do the
opportunity
complete
to,
opposite. 100, you bet the
right,
turn 100% of the time,
right,
and
against
then
other
you check
opponents.
back the river because at
They
that
never call
point
with the worst.
they're never going to call with a worse hand, right?
Yeah. No. Yep. So I think the multi-stage nature of poker makes it very different. I talked to a guy who used to play extremely high level poker, and he said he regretted, and he was very much interested in equilibrium strategies and figuring and studying them to get better. And he said he regretted not playing more exploitatively than he did. That was one of his poker regrets, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Doesn't
But
folks would like to hear that.
yeah, yeah. So I think, yeah. I mean, I used to play sort of like when I first talked to you, like I tried to play pretty much exclusively what I thought was a balanced approach. But
So has that changed?
I'm not going to say
that regret. Do you go along with that regret of like maybe I should be playing more exploitatively?
I won't say too much there. I'll just say that. So I never
this
say
is the line you won't cross.
No.
This is the line. I've said all I could say.
No, I will just say that. Well, I don't ever like lie to try and confuse my opponents. It's also true that things that used to be true about my process might not be true anymore. Like I'm always tweaking and improving and changing things. So things change. And I think if you're going to be good at any, gambling endeavor, you can't just be you have to keep improving, because the direction is always for these things to get more efficient and tougher to beat. So you better keep improving what you're doing as well.
So it's possible that you've changed everything. It's quite possible now that you hand build 150 lineups on the toilet.
That's true. That's true. Well, I mean, I had a funny exchange. So a few weeks ago, I had a ridiculously good run of luck. So I won the 2 main tennis GPPs one day after the other. Then I won the King of the Baseline, which is like the 100,000 to first tennis thing. It was either the next day or the day after. And then I won the MMA with the 3-man stack. And then the next day I won the MLB like medium high stakes GPP for like the 777 or something, right? And crazy run. And then online people are like, gosh, nerdytenor just seems to win all the time. Like I hear he plays a more balanced approach. Maybe that's better. I'm like, he's like, what are you going to use some money for? And I'm like, a second yacht would be nice, I guess. But what's so funny about that is so many people were taking this as evidence of something good about my process, but it doesn't, like, it was just such a random streak. Like it didn't mean anything at all. And I would just say, would you like to see the 4 months that came before? Because they were not so hot. I mean, they were okay, but so I think it's really easy to get fooled by
randomness.
Well, yeah, if you want to use the talent,
right? Because they probably, because these people probably thought of like nerdytenor. He turned on the switch, like he figured it out.
And he figured it out finally. Yeah,
right, finally.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's just a ridiculous run, is all, and those go in the other direction. So how did your NFL go this weekend? This past weekend.
I mean, I'm doing much more on props.
Yeah.
Underdog, prize picks. 3 days from now, the sports betting's open in Kentucky. So
let's see how congratulations.
Let's see how long I last on these books.
Yeah, we'll see how long they keep you.
I mean, I've gone back to basics.
Yeah.
I've gone back to where's the money? Where does the money come from? Where's the edges? And if I have to direct more money, like dude, the props are so much, the return versus the variance is just so dramatically skewed in the other direction.
Yeah.
That it almost feels like I'm playing DFS as as I don't want to say as lottery tickets.
But it's like the high variance portion of your portfolio.
Right. It's like my 80+%, like that whole 80-20 thing, right? The old school way of thinking of DFS. Just that 80% is in props and sports betting. And then 20% is like, okay, I'm not going to play 100 lineups. I'm like, this 2-game slate coming up tonight. I'm playing like I'll play 20 lineups in the $3.20 max. That is 40K to first.
Yeah.
And those 20, and I'm going to build the highest variance lineups like bankroll concerns or like, dude, risky. And then I have I'll 5 into the $20 milli. So like I have like $250 in play, right? I have more money. In play on the outcomes of the receiving yards in the game than I do in DFS. So it's like the DFS is kind of like, I'm going to build the best lineups I can. And if I get 0 back,
That's
it's
fine.
almost it's not as big of a deal, but I'm not I'm no longer reliant on like, can I hit 1 or 2 GPPs a year to make my nut and make the profit? Because it's just like the props that I'm doing is just, it's just like, am I making a ton? Remember, I'm like it seems like I'm one of the few people that I'm proud to be kind of a little bit on the nittier side, but it's like, like if I could average 3 to 5,000 a month on props, like what am I doing? Like why aren't I just putting more money into that than even playing DFS? It's like it's getting to that point of like I'm playing DFS because I enjoy playing DFS, but I'm not looking forward to like oh, I got to play the MLB slate tonight. It's like I have more in strikeout at props and hits allowed props and everything like that, and I don't have to worry like Daniel. The best part of props is not getting closing line value on, even though that doesn't matter that much on props. The best part, it's so much. It's I played DFS almost 8 years. I've been doing props for about a year. That anything that happens that isn't involved one of my players that I've bet on does not fucking matter.
Doesn't matter.
Aaron Judge could hit 3 home runs at 42% ownership, and it doesn't matter. Who cares?
Yeah, I come at the who cares from a completely different perspective on NFL Sunday. I think this last NFL Sunday I played like 14 different slates, including all the showdowns and different things, and 28 contests. I don't even fucking know what I need. Like, I don't know what I need. You tell me. I've got 883 lineups, whatever. Hopefully something in there. No, I had a small plus weekend on NFL, but
do you play all the play all the showdowns?
I like to if I can. The little ones are not especially profitable, but I kind of like it just to keep my process in gear, and it only takes me like 20 minutes, half an hour to put it together. So actually I won like 3 out of the 9 I played, but they were small. One of them was a unique. One was duped twice and one was duped like 8 times, but it was still those are what made it plus EV. I also started messing with super flex. So everybody complains about defense, and for people who don't know, DraftKings now has main slate super flex.
What do the contests look like? They look small.
Well, I'll tell you. First, I'll tell the game for the people who don't know it. So you got 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a tight end, a flex, so anything but not a quarterback, and then a super flex, can be anybody. So no defense, which everybody claims to want. So, I spent a couple days. It wasn't that hard to modify my classic stuff to get it to do super flex, right? It's not that big of a leap. So I'm like, I'm going to max this out. I love it whenever there's a new game like that. That's sort of really exciting to me. It's like, what can I learn? Like, will my code figure it out? Like, is it interesting? Like, I like games. So I max it out. The first week, the max, I'll just bring it up. I have it. So the first week, the Superflex GPP was a $10 with 11,000 entrants, and the payout was first place was 25K. All right.
Okay, that's not bad.
It overlaid. So guess how many people were in the next week?
They cut. I'm assuming they cut it in half.
Correct. So 5,800 players, and then
they still kept it at 10K to first.
They did 15K to first.
Okay.
And then this past weekend,
did that overlay also? Did that fill?
It did. It did overlay as well. And then this past weekend, it was 4,700 players and I think 10K to first. So for people who like new formats, like DraftKings isn't stupid. You have to actually play it, or they won't keep putting it out there. So I would encourage people
Yeah,
to
but
give
it's
it
a
a try.
self-fulfilling prophecy. I've literally told the people at DraftKings operations this,
Yeah.
that they constantly get in the state. They did this with the NBA late swap stuff also, and I literally told the head of analytics there. I said that it feels like some of the stuff that you do is outside of you don't understand user behavior. That you're going, okay, we would like you to test drive these two cars, right? We'd like this to have a poll. Here's this blue is this blue Lamborghini and this red Ford Escort, and they go out and test drive. And you go, which car do you like driving? And they go, I love the blue Lamborghini. And they go back to
Lambo.
right. They're right. And they go, people love blue over red. And it's like, no, they like the Lamborghini over. So like if they did the Superflex contest and said, you know what, 100,000 to first, if they had no problem using it as a, like, we have to make these look as appealing as our other contests.
Yes.
In order to test it, people are not playing it because they don't like Superflex. They don't like playing it because the prize pools suck.
Right. And some of them don't even know it exists. No, I totally agree. Like, you have to commit. It's like, it's going to be 50K to first 6 weeks in a row. And then if it keeps overlaying, the word will get out and people will hop on. Yeah, I totally agree. Yep. No, I'm with you.
Did you find in the Sims, my intuition would be that you basically double stack. I mean, essentially, you're giving yourself another quarterback slot to basically play two different teams in the same line.
Yeah, I found in the largest one, I can't remember, but yes, mostly it wanted two quarterbacks, and I think it had double stacks a little more than half the time. Single stacks less, but substantial, like 30%, and then a small amount of no stacking actually happened as well. Small, but not tiny. But I don't know if my NFL Sims are that good. I like new games, and I figure all things being equal, I'm going to be better than the field at a brand new game with my methodology. It's just sort of like cocky little gamble there that my process is good enough.
The games may go away by the time.
I know, that's the thing. Well, if this had been a major project, I probably wouldn't have done it. But I'm like, it's not that much of a leap to just, the lineup looks like this instead of like that. Okay, same stuff. But yeah, I had fun with that, and I'm always curious to see what it spits out. It's fun to like what's it going to do? I don't know what it's going to do. So I get a kick out of that.
It's hard to teach people your methods, right?
Yeah.
Like that's one thing, the difference between like how you couldn't do content that was anything other than you giving up like your actual code and stuff like that because you've been basically, I mean, I see you answer questions in Discord, and a lot of times it's like, well, my stuff says this, and you always preface it with, I would guess this is the reason why, but I can't be sure.
Yeah, you don't know. I think any database approach is, the title to our first episode together is going to be a little bit of a black box. So you have to be cautious in interpreting the results. I think for smart players like you, even if you don't use them, it can be a nice confirmation that you're on the right track. I already talked about why I used biased sims, just to make sure, especially in a new sport, like I'm roughly in the vicinity. I want to see competitive players have good EV in my post contest sims, right? At least a good chunk of them, if not most of them, should appear at least somewhat plus EV. But another one is like, it's very encouraging when I run something and then what's generated matches some sharp person's style of play in some aspect. Like, oh, I see that, it's pairing this combo with that. And then I see some other smart people doing similar kinds of things. It gives me some comfort that I'm not completely off the deep end.
Because I think that's a misconception that average or below average players have of what it should come out like. It's very similar to that, like that prop example in the sports betting stuff, that like good good players in DFS are not substantially off the market, right? They're just better than the market. And the same thing for sports bettors, where, you know, I've seen tweets. I've seen tweets where people post, you know, their picks, their prop picks or whatever, and they're doing it with some type of projection or anything, and their projection on someone's K's is like this makes this pick a 436% ROI. This is the gold star. Then your stuff is off. Like what's the chance that you're the only one that sees it and the rest of the market is so far off that, if any, like you mentioned before, if anything, you should just kind of almost disregard it. Be much more skeptical when you see that. The demon in my prop betting is the 10 to 15% edges that may actually end up being zero, right? Like the ones that are 20 to 25 are more likely to be positive, at least. But when I see 60s or 70s, I'm like, who didn't update their projections, right? Like I'm just looking, going, what pitch count is off? What total is wrong or something? Because like there's no way that the market could be that far off. And I think in DFS, people are looking at the fact of like, they would think that like dude nerdytenor and his stuff, he would be, if he's good enough, he should be way different than like so many other people. I go, no, he should actually be closer to other people, just on slightly different lineups. Than like everyone's going directionally in the same way. Just maybe diversification is a little bit different, or someone was more accurate on a certain player or on a certain ownership that it made them, they actually came closer to actual than the rest of the market did, and that's why they show up a little bit more positive. But then sometimes they're underneath and sometimes they're low. But in the sense of, you should see all of these people, like you said, in your post contest sims as all profitable players in similar directions that you're going. And the more that you're not, like what I tell people heuristically, of like, if you have no way of doing any of this, download the CSVs, go to results DB, go to whatever, compare your lineups to the portfolio of lineups that the 150 maxers are playing. And if you're like, oh, I had to play this guy because he's way underowned, and then you see that everyone has like 1 or 2% of him, like that's a good sign that you were wrong, right? Like just heuristically, right? Does your lineup look in the type of contest that you're playing, look anything close? Did it project in your projections somewhere close to the average projection of their lineups, to the average ownership? These are very blunt things, but a lot of people have the conception of like I need to do something that no one else is doing. It's like that typically means you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, the only exception to that comes at the individual lineup level. But as you said before, like you don't know in advance which it's going to be. Like I'll run a postlock contest sim and I have like 3 wildly profitable lineups, and it just so happened that those constructions were just way underowned. But those kinds of things are hard to predict, right? But yeah, at the aggregate level, and pretty much I don't tell people what my ROI is, but they almost always overestimate it when they talk to me, which is not surprising, right? Because you
probably have like a 68% ROI, right?
right, of course, 69%.
Right. Of course, when it says same thing when I ask people, it's like, I played MLB every day in GPP, 180 slates. How many do you think I was profitable on? They always say something that's over like 50% of them. And I said it's like 7%. It's like you're not even close.
Yeah.
So what do people say? Numbers like that? Oh, you must be whatever.
Yeah,
and you take a look at some people that release their roto trackers, and you'd see like, Alex like will release his roto trackers, like, oh, all of it our year his ROI is like 2.2%.
Right.
But it's 2.2% on like millions of dollars.
Tons and tons of money. Yeah. So I think a lot of it too comes down to the difference between high stakes and medium and low stakes, because everyone sees the big GPPs, which are the softest. So the outrageous ROIs people sometimes think I make are still too high, but closer to correct for the smaller stuff. But if you need to get down, if you want to make a lot of money and you get down a lot of volume, like the ROIs are not as high when you move up in stakes, right? So yeah, 2% of a big number is a lot of money, right? But yeah, I see highest ROI and expect exactly the contest you would expect it for. You know, the giant 30,000 entry, you know, $15 contest is, it's all down to the percent of people not taking it seriously, and those have the highest number of those entrants.
So your conclusion for all of this is that people can take away from it that these sim tools, simulations, are, I would say the simulation tools are most useful in smaller field contests, although the margin of error in the small field contests can be very wide, while the usefulness of these tools in large field contests for someone that already is a profitable player is not going to be that dramatic. Like we said before, if you're very unprofitable, simply just playing lineups that get spit out of the sim tools would be better than anything else you could possibly do.
Yeah,
Those
I
are the
think
type
that,
of people that don't typically use
yeah,
them. But
right.
I want to make sure that I'm phrasing this right. That if you could get ownership accurate in the smaller field stuff, the sim tools are very, very useful. It's very hard to do that because being off by one or two lineups will mean a whole big. So if you go to one of these products and they're like, give me low small field ownership, like the fragility of that means a lot in the numbers, yet the fragility of the large field isn't as dramatic. So it's
Well, I think
it's less useful, but it's more you could trust the numbers more.
Well, I don't have a strong take on how much you can trust the numbers because I haven't looked at these, so I'm guessing a little bit. But it's definitely, and I think obviously the case. Your second point has to be true. It gets the smaller the number of the entrants, the more fragile the field, the simulated field becomes. Where you could even imagine a case like 100-man field, where you just nail the ownership at the stack level. Let's say you're like, there are going to be 3 pirate stacks and there'll be 8 Dodger stacks, and you like nail it. But because you get all of the details wrong of who is being played, like the individual components are off, that your quote high ROI lineups suck because you got the details wrong, and it turns out you've got all the highly owned pieces, and it falls apart because the details really matter. Like, you can imagine it's easy to construct a toy situation in a small field where you just guess wrong on who the low owned players are going to be. So you think this 6-hole batter is going to be unowned, and then he turns up in 5 lineups, and that just kills your ROI.
Right.
So I think that has to be the case. But I imagine these sites are going to try and address these problems. Although I don't know where they'll direct their energy. I think it's going to be interesting to see like who ends up using these tools, because we're just guessing.
I personally think the market for these products are much smaller than people realize.
Yeah, that's probably true.
But I do think from a business perspective, once the infrastructure is developed, I think there's a big resource cost, like upfront cost. I'm trying from a technical side, business side of like, okay, we have to use all this stuff. We have to spend 6 to 12 months to develop this new thing or whatever, thing like that. And then once it's up, there is a maintenance cost, but it isn't as not as many resources, that the price has to start coming down for it to be worthwhile to maintain. And you don't have to think of like, look at all, we spent an entire year on this thing, and now we have 50 people playing $200 a month. Like, maybe this would be much more worthwhile to just raise our price on our like combo package and add it in for an extra $25, and now have 1,500, 2,000 people, and we make more money that way than trying to keep like 200 power users happy. I suspect that from a business perspective, it won't go away. I don't think it's going to be the type of thing of like, oh my God, we're only down to 5 users. Is it worth having this product? It's just going to be like, well, no, we're just going to lower the price and just include it with everything.
Yeah, I could totally see how that would be the case. I mean, this is capital cost has already been paid to develop it, and now you want to squeeze out whatever you can from the asset. Sure, yeah, that makes sense to me with my limited business knowledge. But yeah, it's gonna.
But there's not gonna be nerdy sims. You're not gonna.
It's
possible. Be a mercenary? Are you gonna be? Hey, you probably wouldn't say.
Yeah.
Right.
Can't wait for the question.
Right. So I have to ask the question of: have any of the publicly available tools and stuff, have they consulted with you on certain things or paid you for or anything to ask you questions about whether they're not your process, but just, hey, nerdy, take a look. Does this make sense? Type of stuff. And you don't even have to, maybe it's the type of thing that you don't even have to answer.
No, I can't answer that. No, that has not happened. I will say that at one point, one of the major sites floated the idea of selling my stuff as a product. It was very vague, just sort of a talking about it thing, but then nothing came of that either. So
how much would you need? How much would you need to sell?
I don't know. I think I have there are 3 exit strategies for me from DFS or exit scenarios. The first is it's not profitable enough to be worth my time. The second is I just get completely sick of it, which is related to the first. And the third is like I go busto. I think the last is not very likely because I would quit long before then. But if any of those happen and I want to get into the commercial software space again, which I'm not sure, then maybe I would consider selling it as a product in some way. But
what if you get a big opera gig or something?
Yeah, that's where all the big money in the music world, let me tell you.
Yeah, but what happens if you got it's a big production tour? You'd be touring the world. You're the star of the show, and now you could just say, okay, here's your full software that's recurring revenue.
Yeah, I guess that's somewhere as likely as me winning the Millie Maker next week or today. I guess similar likelihood. Possible, not very likely.
And you and as of that right now, you've never won the Millie Maker.
No, nope.
No. So
I split a Millie. I split a Millie with one other player in 2020 on a showdown slate. That's the closest I got.
That's closer than a lot of people that
it's closer than almost anybody. Of course.
Well, I'm talking about the people that have a 758 way tie. And it's like, like the Davis Matic Millie winner.
Well, I tell people I want a million pennies on a DraftKings. I want $10,000 on that gigantic split I mentioned earlier. The single game. Yeah, I want 1 million pennies.
You also won 5 million crowns on a.
That was like worth $9,000. I think that's the
luckiest thing. The best I've gotten. I've gotten 30,000. I've gotten 40,000.
20, 30, 40s.
20,000, 30,000, 40. They don't like me.
Yeah, you must not be saying the right things to your rep.
Right. Because 5 million crowns, it's like
it's like $9,000 or something.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like $9,300, I think, or something.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. No complaints there.
Yeah, but you got
that one taxes. I didn't. Yeah, you do have to pay taxes on it, but boo-hoo. Woe is me.
Anything else that you like to defend yourself on the trial of your sins of
No,
of
I
talking
just
about something that everyone else was kind of doing behind the scenes, regardless.
I guess I could just address, Cheese is Good. Dave Potts tweeted that he didn't know until he was on Twitter that Nerdy Tenor ruined his life, and so I just wanted to publicly apologize to him for that. I sorry. Yeah, I think that's it for that.
So people get at Nerdy Tenor on Twitter.
Yes.
If people think that we're going to blame you, where I'm not, but if the Sims said that you should have won and you didn't, it's all your fault, right?
It's my fault. Doesn't matter who made the sim. Yeah.
Right.
Just,
right.
You can trace it all back to me.
That it's no longer profitable.
Right. Like I'm the Robert Oppenheimer of Sims.
Yes.
This is like nuclear weapons,
You get a chuckle out of the conversation like this?
I do. It's pretty funny for the most part. It's the trolls are most fun, but the sincere ones are funny because it's like these people take me more seriously than I take myself. That's always
now the fun puns are the
funny
ones that take the troll comments as seriously.
Right.
You seriously, but the troll comments of like, why is everyone hating on Nerdy Tenor? It's like, no, it's Twitter. It's all shit talk and shit posting. Come on.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
we didn't hit we 2 hours.
Yeah, we're slacking. Yeah.
Right. It didn't hit the record of the last time. I feel like I let you talk enough, right?
Yeah, no complaints. You're sparing my wife from me, brain dumping all this boring fantasy stuff onto her. So
right,
she thanks you. She's very kind and will listen, but it's better for me to get most of it out here.
At Nerdy Tenor on Twitter, at Blender HD for me. Let's see what happens with the sim. Let's see that. I mean, it seems like I put out a podcast once a month, and then like lulls is like kind of like the DFS drama. Like what's going to happen and whatever, but people don't realize it's a very small bubble.
Oh my god!
It's a really small bubble.
Yep, it's pretty funny.
But if you want to be in the small bubble and you want to learn more about the game theory of daily fantasy sports, if you don't want to use Sims, if you want to use your brain over Sims, but at least understand kind of how Sims work, take the 15-hour audio DFS masterclass at theoryofdfs.com.